As I mentioned in the beginning of the semester, we have to make sure that we're avoiding plagiarism at all costs. So today we're going to review a little bit about plagiarism. I have 10 scenarios that I'm going to read through, and we're going to try to identify whether or not they are plagiarism. So each scenario as I read, then I will explain yes or no on whether it's plagiarism and why it would be what it is. Then on the second page, we're going to go into common knowledge, which we've discussed already as well. And we're going to identify whether or not something should be cited because it is common knowledge. So let's start off with the first scenario. A student uses an internet article in researching her paper. She finds several of the ideas in the article useful and develops it in her own paper. Since she does not quote from the text, she does not cite it in her paper, but she does put the reference on the works cited page. Would this be plagiarism, yes or no? Yes, this would be plagiarism. The reason why it is plagiarism is because we have to make sure that if we are citing something in our paper, as well as putting it on the works cited page, they have to appear in both places, otherwise it's considered plagiarism. So if you cite something in your paper, but fail to put it on your works cited page, then it is plagiarism. If you put something on your works cited page, then I have to be able to cite it and see that citation within your paper. If it's not in one of those two places, it is plagiarism. In researching a paper on Mary Kingsley, a student discovers that Kingsley was born in Islington in 1862. She didn't know this fact previously. However, every article she reads on Kingsley reports the same fact. She does not acknowledge the source of this information with a citation. Plagiarism, yes or no? No, this would not be plagiarism. This would be one of those considered cases of common knowledge. Although she did not know this fact before doing the paper, as the student learned of this fact, the student also found this fact in other place or every other place that referred to Kingsley. Therefore, it can be considered common knowledge. Number 3. You are taking a class that a friend has already taken. She lets you read her paper in order to get some ideas and tells you to use any parts of the paper you find useful. You incorporate some of her paragraphs into your paper without citation. Plagiarism, yes or no? Absolutely plagiarism. This is the biggest thing. You cannot take someone else's parts of their paper, someone else's written words, and incorporate them into your paper without citing them. This is the big no-no, one of the big no-nos where you can get in major trouble for plagiarizing. Number 4. A friend offers to let you read his paper in order to get some ideas and tells you to use any parts of the paper that you find useful. You incorporate one of his paragraphs into your paper, and you are careful to include all its citations from his paper in your footnotes so that the reader will be able to find the original source of the information. Plagiarism, yes or no? Yes, this is plagiarism as well. And here's what we need to look at. The important word in this scenario would have been footnotes. Footnotes is not the place that you put the citation information. You want to place that in the works cited page. A footnote is something completely different. So I'm sure that you've read, whether it's a historical book or some type of book of literature, where at the very bottom of the page you'll see like a little number. It says like 1, and then it has like some explanation next to it, and sometimes there's a 2, 3, several different things. And then as you're reading through that page up above, you'll notice where the 1 is next to maybe a specific word. That is a footnote. So that is referring to maybe some extended definition or extended information that the writer didn't necessarily feel was relevant to put in the paragraph or the sentence, but figured that the reader needs to have more information to completely understand it. And that's the footnote. And this is why this one was plagiarism, because it was placed in the footnotes, not the works cited page. Number 5. A student finds a picture on the web that perfectly illustrates the point she wants to make in her paper. She downloads the picture, but does not use the website's analysis. In addition, she writes her own caption for the picture. Since the analysis and caption are her own, she does not include a citation for the picture. Plagiarism, yes or no? Yes, this is plagiarism as well. Any picture that you would take or any other person would take, any type of illustration, anything that basically does not belong to you needs to be cited. It is not yours, it's not property of you or yours, so you have to make sure that you are citing this information. So whether it's a picture or any other type of image, you have to make sure that you cite where that picture came from and put that in your works cited page, as well as citing it and labeling it within your paper. Number 6, a student uses a data set collected by his professor in his analysis of economic trends. Since he develops his own analysis and since his professor has not published the data, he does not include a citation for the data set. Is this plagiarism, yes or no? Yes, this is. So data set, any collected information, pie charts, graphs, anything of the sort, those are not yours unless you created that information. It does not belong to you. So you have to cite where that information came from. Even if your professor didn't plan on publishing it, it's not your information. It wasn't originally created by you. Number 7, you find an interesting analysis of Kant's categorical imperative in a book on 18th century philosophers. You do not quote directly from the text, but you mention the author of the book as the source for this idea and include a citation at the end of the paragraph. You also list this as an entry on the works cited page. Plagiarism, yes or no? No, you have covered yourself. You have cited the information within the actual paper, as well as making sure to include that citation on the works cited page on where that came from. So you have avoided plagiarism altogether. Number 8, a student finds some interesting information on a web that is not under copyright. She downloads several paragraphs and incorporates them into her paper, but doesn't cite them because they are in the public domain. Plagiarism, yes or no? Absolutely plagiarism. This is one of the things that can definitely get you into trouble really quickly. As I had mentioned to you in the beginning of the semester, I do run your papers through a program that checks for plagiarism. This is one of the things that I would absolutely find almost immediately. And that would be anything that is published on the internet. So it is not public domain. You have to cite where that information came from. Number 9, you are discussing your term paper with your professor. She gives you an interesting idea about how you might interpret some of the material that you have been studying. Since the discussion was formal or informal and did not pertain to an area in which your professor intends you publish, you incorporate her suggestions without attribution. Plagiarism, yes or no? As crazy as it sounds, yes, this would be plagiarism as well. And here's why. So you interpret some of the material different than your professor did. So your professor is giving you ideas on a different way to interpret, so you did not think of this previously. It was not your original thought or how you viewed this. So you still need to give credit where credit is due and make sure that you cite your professor. Number 10, you find a very interesting quote from Gregor Mendel's Experimentation on Plant Hybridization in a book about Mendel's life. In your paper, you include the quote and cite Mendel's paper as the source. Plagiarism, yes or no? Now, this is a tricky one, and here's what we have to look at here. It is plagiarism because we are looking at, it says you find a very interesting quote from Gregor Mendel's Experimentation on Plant Hybridization in a book about Mendel's life. In your paper, you include the quote and cite Mendel's paper. So experimentation on plant hybridization is a paper that's mentioned in a book about Mendel's life. And you are now citing from the paper. You have to cite from the source that you are currently using, viewing, looking at, or getting this information from. So you need to cite from the book, not from the paper. Of course, you could look up the paper and go to that paper. And then if you're just strictly looking at the paper, then you would cite directly from that. Otherwise, always cite from the exact source that you are currently looking at and using to use for that citation. All right, so now moving on to common knowledge. This referring to, we talked about the common knowledge, so you'll have an idea of this already. So should you cite it, yes or no? The first example. In your paper for your genetics class, you note that humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. You didn't know this before you took the course, but decided not to provide a citation for this information since all biology textbooks contain this information. Should you cite it? Yes or no? That would be a no. This would be common knowledge. You could go online right now and put in Google and type in how many pairs of chromosomes do humans have, and you will come up with the same exact answer. Every single biology book, textbook you look at will find the same answer. So as long as you can find it everywhere that you look, then it's common knowledge. You find a really good journal article about the psychology of adolescent girls with eating disorders. Use some of the ideas, but don't quote directly, since nearly every book and article that you looked at referred to this article. Don't cite it because it's common knowledge. Should we cite it? Yes or no? In this case, yes, we should cite it because we are not saying that it is found everywhere else. This is not like a citation that was used in everywhere, so we have to make sure that we are citing exactly where that it came from. And number 3, you decide to introduce your paper on Jane Austen with a quote from another famous author. Since your professor will know where the quote came from, you don't include a citation. Cite it, yes or no? Yes, absolutely. It's not your quote, so you have to make sure that you cite where that came from. Number 4, you find some interesting information on fractals on the web. You don't cite it because material on the web is considered common knowledge. That would mean a lot of stuff is common knowledge. So this one you do need to cite, yes, because it's not common knowledge. Everything that you find on the web is not common knowledge, so you have to cite exactly where that information came from. And last, number 5. The proverb, "the early bird catches the worm," seems like a good quote to use in a subject with the subject of your paper, so you decide to quote it. You go to the library and find a book on proverbs so that you can provide a citation. Should you cite it? Yes or no? No. This would definitely be one of those common knowledge rules. A proverb would be one of those common knowledge where it's a phrase, something that we've heard a million times over, and to find exactly who originally said it would sometimes be nearly impossible. So this would definitely be one of those common knowledge terms where you don't have to cite it. So that's a little bit about plagiarism. Hopefully that helped you a bit. If not, feel free to still ask me any questions that you may have.